When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now, there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And the disciple said to him, "You see the crowds pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up again and began to walk about. She was about 12 years old of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. Mark, the evangelist, likes a sandwich. The technical name for this sandwich is intercalation, and this is where one story is sandwiched by another. Today's gospel is one where the filling, the story of the woman with the hemorrhage, is inserted between the bread, the story of Jairus' daughter. There are 5 other times when Mark uses this literary technique. The point is that when we read them, each element, the bread and the filling as it were, enhances the other, and we end up thinking about both more deeply than we otherwise would have done. Intercalation. For instance, in today's gospel, the girl is on the point of adulthood. That's the point when she's about 12 years old and therefore about to start to menstruate, whereas the woman has been ill for 12 years and has not been able to stop bleeding. These coincidences, both females, both 12 years, blood about both stories, lead us to think more deeply about the role and the status of women and how and why we value perhaps youth over the old and our squeamishness about women's things. In reality, nothing much has changed since Mark's day. We, the church, still feel squeamish about women's things. Each story has its own weight. I guess that what we think more about the girl that and her dad than about the older woman. Why do we do that? Images of girls whose lives have been cut short by ill health, war, famine, gang violence puncture our emotional hearts. And so we identify with Jairus, and it's right that we identify with Jairus. That's the whole point of that bit of this intercalation, the bread of this sandwich. But even as we do that imaginative work, we also need to engage with the story of the woman, the filling. Mark makes the point that Jesus pays her as much attention as he does to the daughter of the local big man. Jesus listens as she tells the whole truth. You can imagine that telling took a long time. Mark reminds us that even with such a prolonged series of setbacks, sufferings, inept doctors, no financial security, declining health, this nameless old woman still has her dignity and her capacity to act. Mark presents us with quite a hero.